if you haven't been called to do something, this is where, the reality hits. Am I supposed to be doing this work, or did I just make this up and I just kind of wanted it because it seemed like a great opportunity at the time? And now the question really is this work that you really want to do? So that is a question every day. Is this work that you really want to do? And the answer at the end of the day is yes, this is work I still want to do. And I think there's a lot of obedience that is tied to doing this work. I'm not just doing it for me because I know it's going to make a huge difference, not just to my family, my kids, my grandkids. I believe it will have a ripple effect in some way. I might not be able to articulate it right now, but there are certain things that have happened in the past, and we're like, when they created this thing, it really changed things for us. We're not doing things like how we did it back then. And maybe the people who invented those things are not here anymore, but it's really changed how we think, how we move, and how we show up. And I feel very much this is how this work is going to be. I see it. It's such impactful work that we cannot do without it. It's from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective. This is work that affects us one way or another, regardless of how we identify, from a class perspective, from a race perspective, from a religion perspective, from a political perspective. It affects us, and that's why for me, I just feel the need to keep pushing and to keep doing this.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Hello, I am Jess Miller, business strategist and coach, and I have had the absolute privilege of knowing Annie for well over 6 years now. And throughout this time, I have been able to call her a client, a mentor, and most significantly to me, a friend. And so, in celebration of Annie's 100th episode of the podcast, we are, she's handed over the mic, and I am diving in to really interview her. And in this conversation, she is going to share about how the landscape of racial equity work has shifted and evolved over the years that she has been teaching and sharing this in online space, how the work and the longevity of being in the work has influenced and impacted her personally as a migrant woman of color. And also she delivers about midway through a absolute masterclass on business sustainability. So make sure you listen all the way through to the end. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hi, Annie. I am so excited to be here, role reversing with you and taking the mic, taking the wheel.
Yeah.
Having this conversation to celebrate 100 episodes of Represented. So exciting. What an achievement.
It is extremely exciting. And the reason why you're there, sitting on that seat, asking the questions today, you will be asking the questions, is because you have been part of this from the very beginning, and not just the podcast itself, the making of me as a racial equity coach. You've watched me move and, kind of shift niches from when I was supporting migrant women of color to unshackle their self-limiting beliefs, and then seeing the opportunity to do this racial inclusion and equity work and stepping into it and helping me position myself. And then a podcast is something that I wanted to do. And then the timing felt right. And then you helped me with that. In fact, one of the key things you did, Jess, was suggesting that we get an original jingle for the podcast, which really worked out so well because my sister-in-law ended up doing it for us. And the number of compliments I have gotten about the jingle. In fact, there was somebody who asked me that I interviewed, and they were like, "Is there a way that I can get it as a single? Like, can you download the
Put it on
entire
Spotify.
song for me so that I can have it on my playlist?" And I was like, "Oh wow, nobody's ever asked me that." So you were very instrumental in that, and that's because you know me so well, and you knew what was needed and your strategic brain and thinking. And it's been just a beautiful partnership. And I can't wait to, do this 100 episode with you today.
Yeah, I mean, what a trip down memory lane. And I think that that's just such a one of the many moments I'm sure we'll cover of the power of those long-term relationships to, at the time when we were working together and I was your business coach and strategist, but also to know that you had someone in your family that was a professional singer. And I was like, hang on, why are we looking for, some generic audio here when you literally have the connections and the
Yeah.
ability to do something really unique here?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
good. So good.
so good. And so, I mean, you just touched on so much there, and what a full kind of circle moment this is to kind of come back in after 100 episodes of this podcast, and also many years now in this field, and have a conversation about what has changed
Mm.
since you started. Because, like you said, like you have not only been doing the racial equity work for many years now, but prior to that, your work was centered in supporting migrant women of color, and so really was the progression. It just made so much sense. And so I'm really curious for you to share, like, if you consider where things were when you first started in this space, and when represented was first birthed, to what the landscape's currently looking like. What are some of the big themes that you've noticed?
So back 6 years ago, this work of racial equity, particularly in Australia, it was still very much taboo. And in some ways, it's still quite taboo. You can't just go in and talk about matters to do with race because it always ruffles feathers depending on how you have the conversation. One of the things that I learned quickly, and maybe not learning that I already knew, is that how the language, and most of it was coming from the US following the, public execution of George Floyd, that language wasn't going to work for us here in Australia. And so there are just certain ways in which we position ourselves and how we have conversations that is very, very different from the United States, where racism is very in your face. It's overt. Here, it's covert. It's not in your face. And so the language is very, very important. If you want people to come along on the journey with you, you've got to do it in a way that allows them to listen. So for me, that's where I was sort of looking at things and positioning myself, knowing that my language needs to be quite different. Um, and just seeing the opportunity before it being very taboo, and then just this hunger that just came, and there was just everybody wanted to know, how can I be more anti-racist? How can I build a more inclusive, equitable business from a race perspective? And there was just a lot of interest and hunger, and it was a boom in that season. It was a huge boom. And then things have shifted considerably. And the change that I witness now is from it going to be from the subject of race and inclusion being something that was very central and fundamental and important from a values alignment, to it being something that has been put in the back burner, either because it's too hard to do and you're not seeing the results immediately, or because it doesn't affect the powers that be. you know, white people are not being affected by this on a daily basis, or so they think. And so it's not something that they feel that is a priority. And of course, the backlash that we are experiencing, seeing especially with the Trump administration, just seeing how DEI has been positioned, the false narrative behind it, that it is something that disempowers white people. It is something there that is to give Black people or people of color an advantage that they do not deserve. That it is equipping people who are uneducated, unskilled, do not have the merit for it. And that is a false narrative. And when you have somebody who is at the highest office speaking in that way, uh, there are people who will believe that narrative and who will think, well, then DEI is a bad thing. And also I guess the repercussions that come behind, well, if you're supporting DEI, then, there are consequences to this. And so a lot of corporations pulling back. And I guess the question then becomes, was it ever a values aligned work? Or was it just to please what was happening at the time, the public at the time? And so there's a lot we could get into, especially currently what we're seeing with a mass exodus of, lots of people who are using ChatGPT now moving over to Claude, and that being a huge values alignment statement that they're making. But is it just for a season? Will they go back to, using Claude, or will it, ChatGPT, and it won't be a thing anymore?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of learning over the past
Yeah.
year.
I mean, and even the question of are they going to follow through with that change? Because I know there's even been conversations of people like, yeah, I'm going to jump over to Claude. And then when they realize the work of migrating, what they've been
Right.
doing and the history that they've built, does that energy and that momentum still carry through? And I'm really curious, like from the Australian context, because you're sharing a bit around what we're seeing in America, and we know for sure that that kind of leads the culture or has historically led the culture of the Western world and what we I guess deem as like the dominant narrative. Do you think for Australia that shift started happening when we did have the referendum and when we ultimately got that no vote, that it almost gave that ability for people to go, okay, well, maybe we don't have to prioritize this as much. Maybe this isn't a forefront conversation that needs to be continuing to happen.
Well, I think that contributed to it in a big, big way, but I think it wasn't a new thing. Those people who voted the way they did, and we got the no vote for the referendum, uh, it was who they always were.
Yeah.
It was who they always were. And I think it just showed us, especially those of us who are very pro liberal, pro inclusion. I think we had believed that majority were, and then seeing how the results came about. And I guess it's very similar to the United States when people were waking up the following day and seeing, Trump has become president, going like, how is that even possible? And just being so, so shocked about it. And I think, yes, what's happening in the US has really influenced us here as well in Australia, and yes, that referendum as well. But I think also it's the fact that white supremacy is still so strong within the structures that have power. And when those levers are pulled, we get to see what the impact is in real time. Uh, and I believe it also comes down to education, Jess, because when I look back at that time for the referendum and the information that was being shared that was going to inform us so that we could make a decision, a lot of it had a lot of falsehood behind it. If we vote this way, this gives our First Nations people this kind of power. You could lose your land, you could lose ABCD, which wasn't rooted in truth. And so those who were making decisions as we were voting were thinking on that information we were receiving and going like, well, I don't want that to happen. And that being a falsehood, not enough time was allowed for education to happen and people to really understand. And we're now living in a time where we want information so quickly. We're not willing to sit with it long enough to understand, to hear from different voices, and really be grounded with, is this credible, or is this just something for this particular season to get us to do something in a particular way? And not really sitting and grounding your own opinion and asking questions and interrogating the sources that you have. I think you hear one thing and you kind of run with it. And one of the things, I was listening to a podcast recently, and I'll reference the United States just because of the amount of information we get from there that influences the rest of the world in some way or another. And it was during the political campaign between Trump and Kamala Harris, and it was around uh, immigrants eating cats or pets. And that was taken, that narrative, that false narrative was taken, and it was used as a political campaign to make people think a certain way of immigrants, that they're eating cats, that they're eating people's pets. And it was so untrue. But people got onto that bandwagon and they started participating in this untruth, going like, yeah, Fluffy's been missing for a couple of weeks, maybe the cat got eaten or whatever. And so when we look back at situations like this and how things get taken out of context, how social media is used to propel untruths, if we're not grounded in really taking the time to educate ourselves, really taking the time, okay, I'm going to read from this source and this source and this source. I'm going to have these conversations with these people at the dinner table or wherever it is so that I can begin to form my own opinion on this and see if there's any truth in that. And I think that was one of the things that, or rather, that's one of the things that is letting a lot of people down, not doing their own education and allowing the headline news to dictate what they believe.
Mm. And I think it's such an important conversation to be having. Like, I know even if I'm looking at social media now and I'll look at certain things and not even realize it's AI generated content, I'm like, oh, wow, like look at this thing that's happened. And, oftentimes it's like animals doing funny things and you're like, oh, wow, that dog's just rescued its owner. And probably my husband will be like, Jess, that's AI. Like, and
Yeah.
it really, really requires us to stop and understand like where is the source of whatever it is that we're consuming, whether it's a like funny little video that's maybe AI generated or real, or whether we're talking about information that's coming through about campaigns, about things that we're making big decisions about. And I know before we hit record, we were having this conversation about research even and how now we have so much more information available to us at the tip of our fingers, but also what that's created is a level of like loss in the sense that we're not actually researching, we're not critically assessing things, and even for some of us, like the ability to research and to understand what's included, what's not included in those conversations is actually a learned skill and not one that everyone holds. And so, you can understand where when there's constant misinformation being spread around, it is really hard for people to discern, okay, well, like what's truth and reality
Mm.
and what's not. And I think that that's why the work that you do around truth telling is a really important conversation. I think something that's going to be further and further at the fore as we move forward into this space where there's, I mean, so many pieces of misinformation swirling.
There is a lot. And also being further grounded in our values, I reckon,
Mm.
because telling the truth can also be a very expensive thing to do in the times we're living in because there are consequences. If you're uh, really campaigning or very pro a certain thing that perhaps those in power are not for, it becomes a dangerous place. It becomes a dangerous thing to do. And so if you're just an everyday online business owner and you're just trying to do the right thing, you're just trying to keep the doors of your business open.
Yeah.
Some things feel so political, and I'm like, I'm not getting into that. I'm not, going to change my messaging, or I'm not going to uh, come across in this certain way because it could put me at risk of, A, B, C, D, whatever that is. And so that fear tactic is used, and it is so effective because then people do not want to have anything to do with it. They're either becoming bystanders and just watching, even though they might like to participate and say something or do something differently, but it might come at a cost. Are they
Mm.
ready? Are they prepared for whatever that cost might look like? If it might be loss of revenue or reduced revenue or brand reputation and so on and so forth. And so fear is being used so strategically, and it is working, and it has worked historically really, really well to keep particularly those at the margins just to remain within the margins.
Do you think that there's, maybe then this sense of almost apathy when we talk about like the level of entrenchment within systems and culture? Like, do you think that there is this maybe part of people where they're like, life is busy as it is.
Yeah.
Being a business owner, there's so many hats to wear. What what hope have I got? What contribution can I possibly make as my, small coaching practice or small consultancy? Does it really matter if I do or don't speak up? Like that's a drop in the ocean.
Mhm. Yeah, that is such a good question, Jess. And the thing is, we have become so desensitized, so desensitized. We see certain things and it's so shocking, but you just move on with life because things are moving at such a high speed. And particularly the cycle of news in terms of the negative news that we're receiving is so much that you can't keep up. You're trying to digest the news that happened last week, but there's something new that's come today, and you're like, okay, what's this new thing? And I think it's been made in such a way deliberately. And if we're not careful, we can lose sight of what we're meant to be focusing on right now. But I still strongly believe, Jess, that it is those who are very values led, those who are really grounded in the things they believe in and continue to amplify those things that help them stand out from the park. It's the ones who go like, I'm not doing this because of A, B, C, D. And when they make such a stand, the people who are watching from the outside, the potential clients, they take a step closer to them because sometimes people need to see what leadership looks like. Sometimes we need to be reminded, hey, you can speak up, you can do this, you can position yourself this way. And that could in itself begin to fuel another kind of positive fire for people to have a look and join in. And I think we've seen that, especially with the mass exodus to Claude. I know I have some really incredible clients who are like, I'm done with this, particular AI tool. I'm moving this way, and this is why we're doing it. And that stand in itself sees people paying attention. Okay, so who are you? Why are you making this change? What are your values? And when you think of who you want to align yourself, who you want to do business with, who perhaps you want to take care of certain areas of your business, who you want to partner with, are they the people who are able to really stand firm in their values, especially at a time when things are so shaky, values in particular. And so it really, really allows people to stand out for the right reasons, in my opinion. I'm looking around and seeing who are the people who are still speaking up when at this time it can be costly to speak up about certain things. Who are the people who, despite what is going on, their values are still very, very much rooted and grounded in the things they've always said that they are. And given our coaching and personal development industry that has been so saturated in the past 6 years, it's just kind of blown up. But we are seeing that decrease now. We're seeing for a lot of people, it's not sustainable. They haven't been able to sustain their businesses. And I think it's those who are grounded, those who are rooted and their values driven that separate them from the rest. And you're like, yes, if I want to work with this particular kind of coach, this is what I'm looking for, because there's so much same and same messaging. But what is going to be the defining difference? It's those values. And when we're speaking up in times like this and drawing a line on the sand and saying, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe, and that having a positive impact on your business. I still believe that strongly.
Yeah, and I think it's going beyond to having, well, these are my values and it's written on my website and things
Oh,
like that, but to actually being like, how are they lived in my life offline and how are they entrenched within my business? Like, what are the systems? What are the processes? How are my offers structured? What's in my messaging? Like all of those things that really contribute to the lived experience and the embodiment of those values, rather than them just being, like you say, like some rhetoric or a page that we have on our website that we've beautifully crafted but aren't actually aligning and living by. And I think that, you know, for a while there, and I certainly remember like a season where I was supporting you, and there were conversations about how do we ensure that people are doing this work from that grounded place and not being a tick box, not being because this is a moment in time, this is what people are looking to. They're looking to see, do you have a DI statement on your website? Do you have your acknowledgement to the country at your
mm,
workshops and things like that? And so it became a very formulaic, like almost like good student, good girl type approach where it's like, am I ticking those boxes? And like you say, it's now who's still doing that? Where is that still happening? And with the news cycle, of course, like we are, just by nature of how fast it moves, we can't be an expert and a commentator on every topic, but it's understanding where our lines in the sand are, and
yeah.
from that acting differently, whether that is through our own education. I think something that I have taken from you so many times, being also someone that's benefited as being a client in your spaces and in your rooms, is that our most influential table is the dinner table. And it's that we can have those conversations and educate ourselves and live in our values and be that embodiment for our children, not necessarily because, yeah, maybe, again, like there's certainly an idealist part of me that's like, let's change the world. And I would love to see it change like in an instant. But it's like the way that we get into these systems and create sustainable change over time is changing generationally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will take time.
Yeah.
Something that we're not good at. We're
Mm.
not good at waiting. We're not good at taking the time to build relationships. Relationship building has been one of the most important foundational uh, s- uh, values within my business, building relationships, especially with people who are interested in this work, but they're not ready to invest in it. People who have been on my wait list for years, and they're like, Annie, it is because of your consistency. It is because you haven't imposed yourself on me. It's because when I wasn't able to join, we still kept on having this conversation. We still kept on having a relationship. And now I'm ready and I want to invest. And so that's another thing that people don't necessarily understand. This work takes time, and even yourself as a client, you're not going to see those changes immediately. It might take a number of years for you to be holding space for somebody who has a marginalized identity, and for them to go like, oh my goodness, I feel like I've been held in a way that I've never been held before. There's something so different about you, Jess. And if you look back, it's been because of the time and the effort you have spent honing your craft and doing this work of inclusion that allows you to hold space in that way. It's not something you can do quickly, it
Mm-hmm.
takes time. And for a vast majority of people, they don't, or they're not able to invest the time in order to see those changes. They just want it to happen quickly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's certainly a fast-paced society that we're moving into, and it's getting faster and faster.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the ability to connect back and go like at the heart of it, we take away the metrics, we take away the revenue, and yes, of course, we get to build these beautiful, abundant businesses, and our wealth and resources be that ripple effect for overflow and care and contribution. But also, you know, it's so I guess cliche, but it's like the journey part of the process, right? It's the not forgetting the things that matter along the way, those being the relationships that you form, those being the way that you live your values, and not waiting until like right when I get to this particular point. And I know certainly I was guilty of that, being like, when my business is a certain size, then I'm going to have this like social philanthropic element to it. And it's like, how can we live in those values no matter how small as well? Like it's
Mhm.
that it doesn't have to be this big version or no version. It's like where is the spectrum there?
I love that. I love that analogy so much because it takes me back to especially if you want to be a generous person, if you want to be somebody who is giving and you're like, I will wait until I am able to give in a big way to contribute to these different causes that mean so much to me when I have the money. But we can start small right now. What difference can we make today? Who can we help along the way? How can we contribute? What's something small you can do on a small scale based on what you have? And I think that's where people underestimate their ability to make a difference. What can you do with what you have? Because we all can do something with what we have, and it's that collective coming together with those little things that they're doing that actually begin to move the needle forward. But when we look around and we see we're not making massive change, or I can't quite see the change, and you give up, then when you do come back to this work, because I believe for a lot of people, it's a coming back to this work.
Mm-hmm.
You're again starting from the beginning, constantly starting because you haven't been consistent in it.
Yeah, and I mean, if we think about that sustainability conversation, this is work that I mean you've been living your entire lifetime, but teaching for many, many years now, and you've seen people come and go in this work, both as clients and business owners that are coming in to learn, but also as educators in this space. We've had
Yeah.
conversations about the attrition rate, and I'm really curious how being on this journey has felt for you as a woman of color to see the transition of this being something that's so desired
Yeah.
to then kind of going on the back burner. And yeah, how has that really felt for you?
Oh, what I've come to learn is that business is not for the faint-hearted. It is not. And learning in real time. It's been hard. And the hardness of it, the difficulty of it is because I am not in community with others who are necessarily doing this work,
Mm-hmm.
because this work touches on the personal. It's not just work where, okay, I'm doing marketing, I get to close the book and walk away and go live my life. This touches on my personal life in so many other ways. And so it's been a very, very difficult journey, particularly going from being so much in demand to not being as in demand. But the interesting thing is, and when it gets hard and I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I still doing this? I'm always given another reason to keep doing it, whether it's a client who signs up, whether I get some work. There's always something that comes almost like in the nick of time. And so it's been a hard journey. It's not for the faint-hearted, but I believe it's during this season, this slow season, that has allowed me to see the necessity of this work for what it is without the bells and whistles and the demand for it. It's really allowed me to see the necessity of this work. It's allowed me to be more grounded and not just doing it because it's in demand. This is really where you get to answer the question, would I still do this work even though nobody liked my post? Because that's where we're at. Would I still do
Yeah.
this work if it's only a handful of people? And you know how people say, oh, I'm so grateful I get to do this work. Even though I change one life, I would still do it. I don't know if that how true that is, but for me, I am in that season of this work has been so suppressed by the algorithm, but also I think people have kind of moved on to other things that they're focusing on in their business, and this hasn't been prioritized the way it once was. How my biggest things as I move through this season is how do I stay relevant? How do I adapt to the times we are in and not die? And we've had this conversation about, Kodak and Blockbuster and how do I stay relevant? Because this work is still needed. It is still
Mhm.
needed. How do I speak to my ideal client based on where they're at? And because you're still in my community, Jess, you know that there's still such a hunger for this work. And in particular, from a community perspective, there's so much happening right now. People just want to be in community. They're like, I need to be somewhere where I'm having this conversation with other like-hearted human beings who are values aligned, where we can talk about these things. And I feel like I'm not going crazy. Like what I am seeing it and it is wrong. And there are others who feel the same way. And so it's really been a season of adjusting and adjusting really on my own is what I would say because I'm not part of a community. I'm not, there's no one who can kind of uh, carry me, so to speak, in this season. This is a very much self-led season that I am in, but also I feel that it has grounded me in my faith. My faith has emerged so strongly during these times because it's not um, it's not just me doing this in my own power or in my own strength. I feel like there's another force that is within me that is allowing me to do this work. There's another force that is within me that is willing me to go. And this is where, if you haven't been called to do something, this is where, the reality hits. Am I supposed to be doing this work? Or did I just make this up and I just kind of wanted it because it seemed like a great opportunity at the time? And now the question really is this work that you really want to do? So that is a question every day. Is this work that you really want to do? And the answer at the end of the day is yes, this is work I still want to do. And I think there's a lot of obedience that is tied to doing this work. I'm not just doing it for me because I know it's going to make a huge difference, not just to my family, my kids, my grandkids. I believe it will have a ripple effect in some way. I might not be able to articulate it right now, but there are certain things that have happened in the past, and we're like, when they created this thing, it really changed things for us. We're not doing things like how we did it back then. And maybe the people who invented those things are not here anymore, but it's really changed how we think, how we move, and how we show up. And I feel very much this is how this work is going to be. I see it, it's such impactful work that we cannot do without it. It's from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective. This is work that affects us one way or another, regardless of how we identify, from a class perspective, from a race perspective, from a religion perspective, from a political perspective. It affects us, and that's why for me, I just feel the need to keep pushing and to keep doing this.
Wow. I mean, masterclass just in that segment alone. I think there are so many really brilliant things to recap and touch on and highlight there because one, I think there is definitely a conversation or a contemplation to be had when we talk about businesses that come and go and what is the effect on the future if those businesses don't exist. And I really think about that in the context of your business and the work that you're doing. If the algorithm or the public demand or just the political will to be having these conversations, or even for corporates to be hiring in DEI educators and experts,
Yeah.
disintegrate, and that work has then, those people are no longer in business and they're disappearing. That's a whole advancement in conversation that goes backwards again. That just disappears. That's not being championed and facilitated. And I feel like, and I know like you would agree, that this is work then, and that's a responsibility that we have as business owners, as coaches, creatives, consultants, whatever power, to make sure that we are engaging the services of businesses so that they don't disappear. Because what does it mean if those conversations aren't being had?
Mm.
And I feel like for the conversation too on space and community and care, and I know being in your room as just as a human, like take my business coach hat off,
Yeah.
take my business owner hat off. It's this space that every month I get to come to and almost just exhale and go like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like you say, there's people here that get it, that there's so much moving that our nervous systems and our bodies and our brains just can't even process
Yes.
the pace and the depth of it. And to have places and spaces where people can intelligently unpack that
Yeah.
and do it with great care and alignment, and go, yeah, like we felt that too, or yeah, this is what we're doing or what we're not doing, or this is how we're approaching it. Like that is huge. And I think that it really speaks to the difference in how you have transformed this industry, and something that I know has been with you from the very beginning, when this work was very like you say, like it was coming out and there was a certain way that the work was taught, and you were just like, nah, I am not going to like blame people, I'm not going to traumatize people. Like, yes,
Mm.
I'm going to call them in and I'm going to hold them to account, but also if they're so fried in their system that they can't receive this information, what good is it? And
Mm.
you have, throughout the entire journey, held the most compassionate, tender of spaces, and that I feel is going to be a huge part of your legacy in shaping how this work creates traction, how this work actually gets people to lean in.
Mm. Mm. Jess, I honestly think that is what has been the sustaining thread in
Mm.
this work and why I continue to do what I do. That lens is so different from perhaps what has been loudest in our industry, the constant correction, the get it right, that you need to invest in this work. But I think, and particularly for us here in Australia, we need a different kind of tone and language. Yes, we know what the impacts of racism are, but the language of how we use it to bring people along on the journey needs to be one where they can sit with. It's not making it palatable for them, but it's just speaking their language in a way that they will listen to it a little bit longer than just go like, oh, I'm not that. Oh, I'm not. No, 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 no. This program is for people who, are racist. It is not. It is
Yeah.
for that heart-led, values-aligned business owner whose heart breaks when they just see certain things happening and they're like, I want to make a stand. I want to be different. I want to do my work differently. I want to hold space in a way that allows those who are not represented to be seen and to feel comfortable. I'm not just holding space for a particular kind of group of people. I want it open. I want it equitable. I want it inclusive. And I think when we begin to identify ourselves in that way, then we see there's room for this work to be done by so many more people other than those who we think are the ones who need this lesson. We all need it. I need it as well. Just because I teach this work doesn't mean that I know it all. Oh my gosh, it's been a journey. And the
Mm.
biggest journey for me has been to ground myself in the things that are my values. For me, calling in is such a big part of what I do. I'm not the constant correcting kind of teacher. For me, I don't learn that way. If you're just constantly, oh, Annie, you got that wrong. Oh, we don't say this anymore. Or you're saying this, and I can't. Call me in, let me make mistakes and just allow me still to be in this space, and I don't get canceled and I don't get ridiculed or used as the biggest example of the biggest mistake that's been made. But I can make mistakes and be so secure in that, yeah, I messed up. I am learning from what I did so that I don't repeat it, and I'm making repair. But at the same time, I get to stay. I get to stay, which is the most important thing, because this is not seasonal work. It's ongoing work. It's how we are raising the next generation. It's how we are keeping our business going and allowing more people to be part of it.
Yeah, and I just as you speak like that, like all I can think of is like our children and toddlers, and like we would never shout at them for going, oh well, like why did you say that particular way? And
Yes.
yeah, it's like, hey, honey, like this is how we can say that better. Do you want to try again? You
Mm,
know, and
mm,
it's having that humanity and that for me ultimately, like while your work is around racial equity, I think the deeper layer to it is around that care-based leadership, is about that identity. Who are you as a leader? How are you in integrity with your values? How are you creating ethical decisions in your business, aligning with ethical other organizations? And that is so much deeper. It's so much more personal than what's the right or wrong language to use right now, or what's the like you should be posting this or saying this about this. And actually on that, before, I know it's a bit of a divergent, but I think like something that I've always taken from your space too is that it's never been a space of, hey Annie, this is happening, what should I think about it? It's,
mm,
hey, I'm like seeing this, let's unpack it, let's understand it, let's like talk about it from what lens am I seeing, what lens are you seeing, what lens are the other people in the room seeing.
mm.
um and I don't know if people would realize that from the outside, that it's not, your work isn't this, here's how to think or here's how to be anti-racist and this is how you do it. It's like, how do we have these beautiful rich conversations that are filled with nuance that then create your own ability to discern and decide and articulate and move forward for yourself.
Oh, you have just captured that so beautifully. Cherry on the top, Jess. It is identity work. It
Mm-hmm.
is care leadership. It goes so much more deeper than just anti-racism or racial equity. It is who you really are as a human. It's identity work.
And I think just to bring it to a close, knowing that we are celebrating 100 episodes of the like podcast, which is just such a huge achievement, and shows the commitment, shows the dedication. I mean, I knew from the very beginning when you were starting the podcast that there would be thousands, and I can't wait to come and celebrate the 1,000th episode with you as well, because I know that when you turn your energy to something, you do it with such
Mm.
commitment, such standard. But if you were to reflect back on these 100 episodes, on this journey of this podcast, like what for you would be the one highlight and the one big takeaway, parting wisdom that you want to leave the listener with, that maybe they can carry forward into their business,
Mm.
moving from this conversation today?
Such a beautiful question, Jess. What came in immediately as you were saying that is keep showing up, keep
Mm,
showing up, keep showing up. Because the person who is looking to work with you, the person who is looking to be impacted by the brilliance that you have, and maybe you're listening to this and you're like, what brilliance? You have brilliance. We've been created in the image of God. And so we all have brilliance in us. Maybe you haven't tapped into it yet, but the point is, there's brilliance in you. Keep showing up. It's the people who are engaged in the long game who end up making a difference. When we engage to work with certain people, whether it is with a doctor or with a therapist or whatever we need help with, we're not going with somebody who began their business yesterday. or a few weeks ago or a year or so ago. It's those who have been there. They have been tested time and again. Even when we're investing in business coaches or people to support us, we're not looking for people who are brand new to this. We're looking for people who are seasoned. The longer, the better, because then you can tell me, you can support me, especially during the different cycles of business, because you've witnessed them and you've stood firm and you're still showing up. So show up. And the other thing, and I said this, I can't remember where I said this, but it must have been a masterclass I was delivering in the last couple of weeks or so. Put your blinkers on. Do not look to the right or to the left and see what so and so doing. Oh, so Jess is launching like this and she has a new program called this. What could I do about mine? I think taking the time to detox and get away from devices for me has been a strong thing. And I'm grateful for the algorithm because of how much it has forced me to go like, well, this is not my source. This is not where I need to be spending my time because I've spent so much time. I'm not seeing the ROI on that. And so I'm going to detox from this and spend time just having space. And that's something that you were huge on in the early days, telling me, Annie, you need to slow down or take some time for yourself. I don't have time to take for myself. I'm building a business here, Jess. But I think I needed to go through that whole growing and giving it all to get to the point where I am now. I can look back. It allows me time to read. It allows me time to read. I have so many books I have to read. It is giving me the space to do that and then to form my thought leadership and not to go with the loudest voices because those loud voices have now been, really, really quietened down. I'm able to hear myself. I'm really able to spend time and write stuff that, I wouldn't have written before because of the loudest voices out there. So my advice is stay the course, keep showing up, put your blinkers on, do not look at what other people are doing and spend time offline so that you can really hear what you need to hear from within and also spend time books, reading, and writing. And in nature, nature is medicine.
Yeah, love that. Beautiful, beautiful wisdom. And I think that there's so much to be learned from that as someone who has witnessed many years and many seasons and cycles of business that especially now when there's so much noise, so much pressure and ability to just get information like that, we're having less and less white space. And I've really, really loved, like, and I send you celebratory messages every time I see you post stories, or you're like, actually, no, I'm not going to do this because I'm prioritizing space or rest and things
Yes.
like that. Because I know at the start, like how much we use momentum and effort to get things going. And like there is such a season for that, but there is also it's recognizing when efforting our way to growth becomes counterproductive and when actually we do need to take that step back. We do need to be really rooted in our identity as a leader, our values, our thoughts, our contribution to the field in which we're operating in, so that again, like we're not just creating this echo chamber of repetitive messaging, repetitive voices. And that's when we get that critical thinking. That's when we get the diversification of thinking that shapes industries, that changes narratives. And so thank you so much for sharing such potent wisdom. Thank you so much for all that you continue to do in championing your message, in creating spaces where coaches, creatives, consultants, all of us can come along and not only be educated, but actually be enriched in the conversations of the issues that are happening in the world and understanding how we, within what capacity and power we have and spheres of influence we have, can continue to show up for this work in a way that's sustainable, a way that we can be in for years. And so, yeah, I'm just going to collectively say on behalf of everyone, I've appointed myself the spokesperson for the collective. Thank you so much for this work. I know that this podcast is genuinely one of a kind, and we've had conversations about that if this wasn't here, these conversations wouldn't be available, they wouldn't be accessible. And so, yeah, that in itself is such a huge contribution, a huge impact. And you're just so amazing.
Thank you, Jess. I have to thank you too for playing such a significant role from the very beginning to where I am right now. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for really giving your all to this cause, to this work, to this business, and just being so invested in my success as much as you would your own success. You've been a great coach, a mentor, and friend. And I am so grateful that God placed you in my path and gave me somebody to walk this journey with, because it's been so much more richer, fulfilling, and it's just made the ride more enjoyable. And so I'm truly grateful for you, the human that you are, and the work that I know you put in on a personal level and on a business level to be as inclusive and as equitable and just a good human being. Thank you, Jess Miller.
Oh, thank you, Annie. So much love. And so for anyone that is wondering what step to take next, definitely go and put yourself on the waitlist for Represented. I cannot recommend it any more highly. It is such a phenomenal program and is such an incredible space holder. And it is a program that I have been through multiple times myself. I'm now doing deeper work with Annie. And so, yeah, I really recommend that as a fantastic starting place. Knowing, like I said, it's not a place where you're just going to go and be like, here's a ton of things to do. It's a place where you get to just show up as you are and be and learn through the process of being human and navigating life in this wild world that we live in.
Yes.
There you have it, the 100th episode of the Represented podcast. I hope that you took as much from this episode as I did. And most importantly, I hope that you can leave this conversation really understanding the depth and the nuance of this work, that the way that Annie brings a space together, that Annie brings people together and facilitates this work is really revolutionary for the space. And, you know, is actually, yes, about racial equity and diversity and inclusion, but deeper than that is about who you are as a human, who you are as a leader, who you are not just in the context of your business, but also in the context of your life, so that your values are embodied, are lived, and just by virtue of you being who you are contributing to conversations, you are contributing to change, to impact. And now more than ever, that is the type of human that is needed in this world. That is the type of care-based leadership that we need to see in the online coaching industry. And so, as someone who has been through the program multiple times, who was essentially there in the delivery suite as it was being birthed, I cannot recommend enough that you head to the link that will be shared below, I'm sure, and join the waitlist for the next round of Represented. Like I touched on in the episode, this is not a curriculum or a framework or a way that you need to think. It is actually a way of opening your periphery and allowing you to decide how you want to be in this world, how you want to lead in your business. And as I said, there is nothing more powerful than that right now in this state, in this world. And so head on down, join the waitlist, and then go and send Annie a DM. Okay, go and celebrate her. 100 episodes is no mean feat. So make sure you head to her DMs and give her some love. And if you have not already left a review for this podcast, please also celebrate her below and leave a review.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. Pimbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.